My buddy. What's up, Craig?
Hey, not much. I like the Muppet intro. That's very proper of me.
Yeah, right. Wait. Let's face it. How many disasters have I been a part of that you have been able to witness? I can think of at least the Amarillo fiasco. So
Yeah, it could be. Misty and I were talking about doing like a kind of like a what do you call that second wedding on your anniversaries, your recommitment or something like that.
yeah.
Um, she was saying, if we invite Trey to do the recording again, maybe we ought to make sure he presses record this time.
Oh, has her mom ever forgiven me for that yet?
Probably not.
Uh,
No, but
we're married.
no, it's fine. No, but yeah. I mean, you've been around for a long time. Matter of fact, we were cleaning up some stuff, and Misty came across a picture of you probably from when you were, I would guess, 16 or 17.
Yeah. I've
Mm,
me and Missy been friends since about that time. Now we're 50, 51 years old, and whew,
hmm
a lot of time.
Long time.
I've gotten to know you for the last over 30 years, primarily through her. And you and I were kind of like, we knew of each other for a long time,
Mm,
because you were dating her and me and her were just friends. So, but I was a far away friend. I wasn't in Denton. So it was like, I'm pretty sure there were some times like, who's this Trey fellow you keep hanging out with and or whatever, or else. And I'm like, I had no idea who you were either. So I was like,
yeah.
we don't know where this is going to go. But then, of course, as time moved on and everything else, you and I became pretty good friends. And, clearly, when I invite you guys to Amarillo to watch me throw up all over a trash can, clearly things have gone well. Okay.
We didn't get that part on video, but we did record you eating it. So I mean,
Right.
it's there for the internet to watch if they want.
That's true. And trust me, I was digging for it last night. I'm going, I really want to see that again. I mean,
Might make you nauseous all over again.
it wasn't going to be nauseous, but I mean, the thing is, and for those who aren't familiar with what we're talking about, a couple of years ago, myself, my coworker Caleb, and my daughter Cadence, all were going to head to Amarillo to do the Big Texan, Big 72-ounce steak, the whole thing that goes with that. And for Cooper's birthday, we met with you guys over at a was it Dave and Buster's or something like that, and
Something like that.
yeah, and we had mentioned that we were going to go on this trip, and you and Missy seemed pretty intrigued about that. So we're like, hey, the more the merrier. Thinking we are going to take one big car and just go, because I had my mother-in-law's, my mother-in-law's Ford Escape at the time. Figured we got enough room for all five. It was no problem. Well, y'all being smart and thinking, we'll just take two cars, which worked out better for everybody because on the way to Wichita Falls, I blew up my axle in my passenger side tire. So
Hmm
all five was packed into one vehicle to head to Amarillo. And then we dealt with the
Yep,
emo
sure
birth
did.
on my daughter, and then we dealt with all that kind of went on with that, and just as we went towards, and again, and I'm sure my daughter will even say the same thing. Their steak was really good. They really had one of the best steaks I've ever had. Just not 72 ounces of it. So
Yeah. hmm
did
Are
them
you
good.
familiar? There's this one competitive eater. She probably does professional competitions and stuff like that, YouTube videos. She ate two of those in 15 minutes. God, I'm forgetting her name.
Molly
Molly.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think she has the record. She had four of them in 20 minutes. I don't have no. I mean, she ate them like a hamburger. She taking her that one going.
Oh yeah. I don't even think she chewed. She just tore it off and
It just
swallowed,
went right to the
you
goal.
know,
That's all it did. Yeah, and
and
I'm
like
like,
just eating it like this. You
I was
know,
like, dang.
it's crazy.
But I mean,
Yeah.
but honestly, it was a very fun trip for what it was. I mean, on just sitting in the car and hanging out with you guys for those 2 days was a lot of fun. And hey, look, I've told Caleb several times now. I'm on Ozempic now, so I really shouldn't be eating a 72-ounce steak. But I'm like, I'll message Caleb every once in a while and say, "Hey, Caleb, you want a rematch?" He's like, "No, man, we're not ready for that." It's like, all right, bud.
Yeah. Isn't it like $72 or something like that? If you
I can't remember why, because I was FaceTiming myself eating it while you were doing a screen mirror type thing with it, and Melissa had messaged me on the Facebook saying, "You better eat that because I ain't spending those $72 for eating those steak." I'm like, "Okay, well you ain't here. Be quiet. You're not suffering like I am." And I think everything would have been fine enough had my sister who was watching didn't put in my head, "Oh, you better throw that up instantly." Because right when I got done, I went to the restroom, and next time I know, she's like, "You better throw that up." I'm like, "Oh, great!" And boom, there he goes. It's a great way to start the show, by the way. Let me tell you right now, it's really the best
yeah,
story ever. If you aren't grossed
vomit.
out now,
Yeah.
just wait. But no, I am joined here with my good friend Craig. He has been a police officer for the last how many over 20 years almost.
23 years. Yep.
Yeah, and I remember at the time when you started going into that, I was getting into truck driving at the time, and
Yep.
you know, I did not know you were going to make it for 23 years. And of course,
Yeah.
you know, your experience being a police officer, what has that been like for you? I mean, how has that changed you from being who you were going into it to who you are now?
Man, I tell you what, a lot of those guys that I worked with, so I was a dispatcher before, give you a little bit of a background, and I was doing that probably for about 3.5 years. Got to know a lot of those guys, and they got to know me. And it took me several times to apply as far as being successfully hired. And there were a couple times where they were like, "Can you really do this job? Do you really think you can?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they went, "Huh, I'm not so sure about that." And the reason why is because I was kind of like I don't want to say a soft guy, but I was like a mild mannered, kind of soft spoken kind of guy. Didn't really like conflict a whole lot. And I have to say, even still, I don't really, if I don't have to get into conflict, I don't want to. But I'm not afraid of it like I once was. So obviously, that kind of gives you an idea that I found a lot of confidence in dealing with conflict through these last 23 years. I mean, you're forced to if you do it successfully. If you don't, you're not going to last long. And if you don't know how to treat people right, as much as there is a stereotype of police officers and how they tend to treat people, just depends on what agency you work for and whatnot. But at the agency I worked for, yeah, you were expected to treat people with courtesy and respect, even if you were being disrespected by those people. So it was a big learning experience. It really taught me kind of where my temperament really gets triggered. And if I start feeling triggered that way, then I can go ahead and start employing some self monitoring mechanisms I've learned over the years to be able to deal with that effectively without getting myself into a pit or in trouble or anything like that. So that's maybe a long way to say that I just learned how to go into it with a lot more confidence and to be able to treat people better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, with where I work at the world's largest casino, and I mean, I have to deal with elements of all type coming through there. And you know, there's the gung ho approach you can go with it. There's always you know, let me go hide and wait till my shift's over type attitude. You know, sometimes I kind of want to do
Mhm.
that. And there's also the passive attitude, like, you know, look, what's going to happen. Just be your best you and just get through it. I mean, you know, unfortunately nowadays everything's on camera. There's no point doing a show; it's on camera. But I mean, everything's on camera now, especially in the crime situation. Like I had a situation up at work one time where um, there was a guy who I was sitting at one of the security desks right there at the front of front of one of the entrances, and a guy walked up and said, "Hey, there's a guy passed out over here in the restroom over there. Can you go check it out?" So I go in
Mhm.
there, and there's a guy face down, shirt off. He's got a needle in his arm. I see the drugs sitting over there in the corner. He's some heroin or whatever. And I'm trying, and he's face down now. I'm a little heavier then than I am now. And I couldn't fit my fat ass underneath the stall to grab him. I had enough to at least get him
Mhm.
arm wise, but I couldn't pull him, and his head was kind of that point to where if I kick the door open, it'll hit him in the head, and that'd be even more of an issue. I have people in the restaurant, just let him sleep, he'll be all right. I'm like, dude, the guy overdosed. You know, so
Yeah, that's
I'm
not a good
I'm
idea.
doing what I can to get air to him as best I can as far away this is until first aid showed up. And then they come in there and they got a skinnier guy for first aid to slide right there, get him, pull him out, and do what they got to do. And the guy actually lived. I mean, at that time, don't know if he's still alive now, but it was his birthday too, and
Yeah.
he went to jail shortly thereafter. But I mean, like,
Mhm.
there's a way to handle that, and there's a way to, like, being all gung ho and or just like, look, just go with what you know best and just go with it, because at the end of the day, you know, people are going to be sitting there watching you do that and going, whether they're going to film you or not, that the internet, YouTube has no boundaries except for copyright stuff. So, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, there is that. So,
Hmm. Yeah, if there had been a song playing in the background while you were trying to do that, then maybe you'd be okay. But if it ended
right.
up on YouTube, but
Like,
yeah,
if someone pipe up the Phil Collins Against All Odds music, please hurry.
yeah, get copyright strikes for this video. But yeah, I mean, yeah, those situations I've dealt with one situation like that. There was over there in where I work, there was a guy just laid out, and I'm like, well, that looks weird the way he's laying. And I walk up, and he's just blue in the face and whatnot. And this is before we started getting issued Narcan. And so I just called for EMS straight away, and he was still alive, and he was still kind of grunting and groaning and stuff like that. They transported him to the hospital. I never got word whether or not he lived or not, but that was a clear overdose. And so, yeah, you just can't let him go in there and sleep it off because it's not at all like alcohol. It's going to basically end up killing him.
What have you seen as part of your job that has changed who you are?
I went through a period of time in dealing with that conflict, kind of like I told you before, where I got a little bit too hardened. And Misty would say, would you get out of cop mode? You
Mm-hmm.
know, to
I can
where
never say that too.
I, yeah, yeah. And so it's like I had to kind of learn to kind of scale it back, at least when I'm not at work, and to some degree, even at work, because that can cause you to treat people differently. You start thinking of them in a particular way, it's going to come out in your behavior. So, man, if it's one thing that really was impressed upon me, probably about 5 to 6 years in, is I need to learn to soften up. As
Right.
strange as that sounds, because I was already there prior to being a police officer, and then just got a little bit too much. So I had to try to learn. I had to find balance somehow.
Did going to acting help you out any?
Um, I don't know if that really helped out. Um, I was never really great at improv. And realistically, one thing about acting that I never really realized was how much creativity the actor does need to bring into the process. It's like you did wrestling for a while, and from what I understand, there is some degree of acting with wrestling, right? Or am I wrong?
Are you saying what I did was fake?
Hey,
I mean,
I'm
you're
just
not
I'm
wrong.
just repeating what I
You're not
hear.
wrong. I'm just asking. That's the question. No, no. Well, I
I'm
mean,
just
yeah.
asking.
There's a certain type of improvisation you have to do as a performer in wrestling. That's what they are as
Mhm.
performers. Although you try to tell that to someone who's trying to think he's going to be a real wrestler, that doesn't work over so well because and I told this story 1,000 times. I was working as a bad guy manager, and I had a guy in my stable who he wore the wrestling helmet type thing, and the singlet and everything else. And he wanted to go on the ring and show everybody what a great wrestler he was. But he's supposed to be a bad guy. I'm like, okay, I get all that. Here's what you do. Tell the crowd that they paid way too less to see you perform. Turn to your opponent and poke him in the eye. You know, do bad guy stuff. And that
Mhm.
never registered with him because he was always told do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Not there's parts of that you can do, but to engage a crowd, engage an audience, and again to have them give a shit about you, pardon my language, but to care about you, you know, you have to show who you are as a character. And I think being an
Mhm.
acting, even being a police officer, being a security officer with my situation, I always go into it as look, I'm me. I know who I am. At the same time, I'm not going to stray from who I am. But if I have to get down and dirty and change some stuff up, I'll do it if needed, you know. But
Yeah.
it's always a last resort for me because I always try to, I leave them with a smile type thing to where, if I can get you to walk away from a situation and be, and, no bubbles, no troubles, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I had a situation one night where I was working Friday nights at the time, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was this one couple. This one lady was following this guy around. She was yelling, "I love you. We need to be together." And it's just going on and on. This guy's ignoring the hell out of her, and I'm like, guys, come here. Come here. See all these things we got up here called cameras? They're gonna
Mhm.
watch you guys fight. They're gonna ask me why did I not do anything about it. So here's the thing: you go that way, you go that way, and let's just maybe this is a big enough place. Y'all can go different places, or just go home, or take it outside. Don't do it in front of me, please, because this is not a place for drama. And they listened and they did what they had to do. And then I'm like, "Go, thank you," and moved on my day. But I mean, that's just how I deal with it. Like you said in wrestling, that there's ways to improvise all that stuff, but you have to make it make sense for you and everybody else.
Mm.
If not, then it's just a big mess. They're gonna sit there and go, "Well, that was interesting." I look at my phone and see, "Oh, that's even more interesting." Okay, great. So that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I mean, being an actor is a lot the same way. A lot of times they'd be like, "What are your ideas?" And I was like, "Uh, I just know my lines." I hadn't really thought about it, and for whatever reason, it just didn't occur to me that the actor also brings something in as far as I mean, I knew that my portrayal of whatever character was central to why I got asked to do the production in the first place, but as far as like coming up with collaborative ideas on how to make the production better, it's like if it's one thing I have learned about myself in creativity like that is a struggle for me. It's like other people, man, they're just like boom, 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 boom. They got ideas coming out their ears, but not me. That is a struggle for me. It's definitely one thing I've learned about myself is not my strong suit.
Well, it's funny because like you take one of the greatest actors of all time, Marlon Brando, right? But Superman's
Hmm.
father in Superman. He was there for one day, and he had to read the lines in the spaceship as he was putting Superman in the spaceship. He came with nothing, and he just brought his
Hmm.
voice and his mannerisms and just read off the cue cards. And like
Yeah,
very very few people can pull that off. Like there's, I mean, I
yeah.
mean, I mean, like I know, like Misty will sit there and tell me and give me crap about how much I like Sylvester Stallone. He writes all the Rocky movies. Not all of them are great, but I mean, most of them are. You know, there's a reason why he brings a lot more to because not only is he bringing the characters, he brings the depth of the character, the the scene, this where it's at. Where you're watching on the theater, you can almost smell where he's at. Because you're part of
Hmm.
that whole entire universe. And I think as
Yeah.
me, which by the way, this is my buddy Craig. Been He's a police officer. He's a one-time big shot actor. I know,
Yeah.
but as you see them play the police officer there
That's
with
my
the
claim to
dog,
fame.
yeah, you had a TV show that lasted one episode.
No, it was
Uh,
like six, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, I only saw you in one. So, but were you in
Yeah.
more than one? Were you in more
No,
than
no,
one?
that was the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I would tell Misty, when we were trying to do, oh yeah, uh, I forget what that one was from actually.
I
I
mean,
remember.
I looked up the deep
Oh,
end and this
that's
just popped up.
yeah. This is the fifth. That was the cast of the fifth. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, it was, by the way,
That's probably
it's funny how you're always playing cops. So clearly you're good at it.
well. They knew I was one already, so I think partly half the time I got asked if I could get a police car, and I said no, I can't do that. And as a matter of fact, I can't wear anything from my department. This has to be a whole thing of just from me. And for the fifth, me and Barry Swindoll, I believe was his name was. He was also I believe he was a reserve Tarrant County deputy sheriff, if I'm not mistaken. It was only like 17 years ago, but we designed and actually put together the police uniforms. So I mean, they were very authentic looking to the point that one day when we were filming on a railroad track, it's just me, Barry, and two of the other guys that were doing this production, fundamentally, you could call it a student film, really, because it wasn't done for a class or for their program within the university, but they were putting it together while they were students. And we were filming this one scene, and we had a guy stop and say, "Deputies, I need to talk to you about something that's going on at my whatever, my farm or my ranch." And Barry and I are like, "Well, we're not actual police officers. We're here filming a little movie." And he kind of looked at us, and I thought, "Oh man, he's gonna call the real police on us." And I remember telling Misty about it later, and she was like, "Well, you were already there." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, that doesn't count." So yeah, I didn't want to muck the waters with that whole thing, because that would just confuse people more. But yeah, that was an interesting little interaction that thankfully turned out okay. I
Well,
mean,
if I
we
remember,
had a fake guns and everything.
all right.
So
If I remember correctly, this movie came out around the same time that No Country for Old Men and There'll Be Blood came out, because this kind of filmed in
I
that same kind of vibe.
yeah, I think so. I forget what's man, like I said, it's only been 16, 17 years, but I'm wanting to say I have this one movie in particular that they had mentioned, Zodiac. It was
Okay,
about, or maybe it was about,
that's
maybe
Zodiac.
about the Zodiac killer.
Okay.
I can't remember. I can't remember the name of the movie, but they said that if I remember right, that was partly inspiration for the fifth. And to be honest, it's like apart from maybe the TV, the actual professional TV show I was a part of for like a day, that was the fifth was probably, I would say, one of the better projects that I was a part of. As a matter of fact, I don't think it would have gotten done if I hadn't harped and bugged them to death, like saying, "When is this thing going to be finished so we can see it?" I think
So,
they were like, "Well," I don't think they thought they had a very good show, to be honest. So,
well, and for those who are watching this who don't know what we're talking about, this is the trailer of the movie that it's called The Fifth, back in 2010.
Found a dead body over by the railroad tracks.
A real dead body? Can I go see it?
does it look like a homicide to you?
More so than any other one I ever seen.
Some guy busted out of jail down in Houston.
When? Tonight?
You too. You gonna tell me your name?
Sorry, Mike. Name's Mike.
Got a call from the police department over at Conroe.
Pull over.
What?
You wouldn't think a guy who just escaped from prison would actually hitchhike.
Sheriff Mako. How good it is to see you, sir.
Is that your pistol?
Planting evidence. So what are you saying? That Baines is just some helpless victim of a genius plan?
No, man, I wasn't anybody's accomplice.
So did the woman get a glimpse of the guy who shot her husband?
I mean, there are so many freaks out there wanting to kill innocent people, and if they're good, they're gonna pin those murders on someone else. I mean, what kind of a sick, psychotic mind would kill 4 people and then pin those murders on some oblivious bystander? Seems inhuman to me.
That guy.
Play that. It seems pretty good.
It really does. And the thing is, and I talked about this earlier before we got on here. Roku's got so many different apps you can go to watch low budget movies or whatever else. How has this not landed on one of those things? I mean, because I can't imagine they pay a whole lot of anything to put those kind of programs on there. So I mean, at least it'll find a platform to be seen.
I think, but at this point, I'm not so sure that the guy who wrote it, and I'm pretty sure a group of them wrote it, but the guy by the name of Brad Egerton had directed it. He's married with kids now, and I think he and his wife have some sort of a business where they film weddings and such. But I'm just not 100% sure why they have decided not to do anything with this. It didn't really go anywhere. In
Yeah.
2010, we did a little bit of a premiere here in the Dallas area, and beyond that, I think people just saw it and they were like, it's kind of a low budget thing, and we're not so sure we want to show this much of anywhere. But I don't know.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, independent films are like, like that's that little dark secret Hollywood doesn't really talk about, but they showcase the hell out of it though. Is because, like, you think about it, Pulp Fiction was technically a low budget film, and it blew up. So I mean, but because you had big name actors in there, but I mean Quentin Tarantino. I mean, most of his movies are based on the idea that these are independent films that I'm making, and only making 12 of them. So this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, and watching the preview. And I remember watching the movie, and like I remember watching one movie, and I wasn't very impressed with No Country for Old Men, for that matter. Or I never saw There'll Be No Blood, so I had really nothing really like this towards. I knew you in it, and I immediately knew who the bad guy was. Shocker, but I mean, it was one of those things where I was watching, I was going, this isn't bad. I mean, yeah, I get where an audience may not want to see this in a big screen theater, but now that everything streams, I mean, how often you and Missy might still go to movie theaters every once in a while, but hell, it's almost cheaper to wait 45 days and wait for the streaming services nowadays.
Yeah, but the only movies we see in the theaters are the ones like the eye candy movie, like Project Hail Mary.
I want to see that, yeah.
That's pretty good. I recommend it.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
there are certain things that I will just pay the money to go see in the theater. I went to go see the new Elvis documentary on there because I'm a big Elvis fan. And, I was hoping to see stuff I hadn't seen before, and I wasn't really all that impressed with that. But it was still a good documentary. And it was Baz Luhrmann doing his own thing they did with Elvis, the movie. So it was like, it's kind of cool that's kind of his passion project that he's kind of, latched onto for the last 5 years. And just now we've done the movie, we've done the concert documentary. Now we'll see what he's going to do next with it. I think it'd be kind of cool if we got Austin Butler to do like an actual Elvis concert and did that. But I'm sure Austin Butler wants to do other things besides Elvis nowadays. But I'm sure let's get that voice out of his head. That's for damn sure. But I mean, for what it was, I mean, I thought this was. I know Misty was part of the thing with you too. She was trying to try her hand in stand-up comedy, or trying to write jokes to be able to get up on stage. Did all that really help you guys out with with any stage fright or any getting in front of a large group of people you don't know and just being you? And I mean, did that help you out any?
I mean, to some degree, sure. You have to shed your inhibitions when you're pretending in front of a camera. Well, and I say pretending, but I mean acting, if you do it as the craft would suggest, is that you're living these scenarios or these situations for real. So you end up getting real reactions within yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the reason why Misty went more of the improv route wasn't so much of the trying to do the whole stand-up thing. I think she was just kind of drawn to maybe that just the snap improvised stuff that you would see. And quite often you hear about from movie sets, you'd be like, oh, that wasn't in the script. The actor added that. I think I saw something here recently about in Thor Ragnarok, Chris Hemsworth, it's like when Loki was all chained up and it was him, Bruce Banner, and then Valkyrie was in the scene, and he talks about, oh, Loki would do X, Y, and Z when we were a kid, and he kind of went back and forth with the story. Totally improv by Chris Hemsworth. It wasn't in the script whatsoever. So it's kind of like that kind of thing is what drew Misty in more so. I kind of always just had the thought that acting was fun because I took an acting class in high school.
Right.
As I got older, I was like, you know what? Missy and I were having a conversation about it's not the things you do that you end up regretting as much as the things you don't do. So, in other words, like, I kind of wanted to try this whole acting thing as an actual profession. And she was like, well, why don't we try? I mean, here in Dallas, there was enough of a scene where we could, at least be some degree active within productions that were going on, and I was more drawn to film and TV. Misty, I think she was more drawn to what would take place behind the camera. So I think if we had persisted in that industry, I think she would have probably pursued producing and directing. And
Or writing.
I was always told, huh?
Or writing.
Or writing. Yeah, she's a pretty good writer. She's written a book, so it just hasn't been published yet. So
Right. Well, and it's funny because and thinking about that now, you're 53 now. Is that right?
yeah,
You're
53.
53 years old. Um, Looking back at it now, that was 16, 17 years ago.
Yep.
If you can go back now, do you think you would do it better this time around? Or do you think you have enough in you now to where if you were to go back and try it, you could make more of a difference with it then or now than you did then? Because I
Man, I
asked that
think that
I asked that because I went back to pro wrestling as a commentator and as a manager, knowing I couldn't wrestle anymore, but I knew I can add input. I can add a certain thing to help others get over. You know, um, sometimes it would come out to where I was the only evil person out there at the ringside, and which didn't help my guys out at all. But at least I got myself over. But I'm trying to get my guys to be evil as well and have the crowd interact with them. But so I was able to do that, and like you try to teaching it to someone else when you haven't learned it fully yourself was kind of my issue. But
mhm.
but as far as the situation, going back to you, I mean, do you think you could go back and do it again?
I think just knowing how hard it is now, if like I had all the knowledge, like if I go back in time, I had all the knowledge I had now, and to go back and do it again, I'm not so sure I would, just only because there was one thing an acting coach of mine said that really probably nails it on the head with professional acting. And we were talking about basically how hard it was and how almost lucky you had to be at the right place, the right time. She added in the stars align and the planets and stars all in formation, almost like cosmic forces had to be in play before you could even make it. We all kind of laughed, and she goes, "You think I'm joking?" And I was like, "Oh." For whatever reason, it's like, certain things people say always stick with us. That always stuck with me because I just realized it's like, man, and I still kind of know some people that are trying to make it out there in Hollywood. And, it's like they've been in stuff, they've been working. But if I were to throw some names out there, like, have you heard of Rebecca Kennedy? Yeah, she's a working actress. But as far as like the everyday person, they're not necessarily aware of who they are unless you've seen one of her films and maybe you kind of follow her career and stuff like that. That's not a slam on her and to any degree whatsoever, but it just shows the fierceness and the realities out in Hollywood. There was at one point I was in talks with a commercial agent in Hollywood, and one thing that I learned is everybody's an actor out there. Everybody. And when I say everybody, I do mean everybody. Every police officer is probably an actor. Everybody working in a retail store is probably an actor. Everybody probably who's an attorney is an actor. Everybody's trying to get into the acting world out there. So they've got more than enough people that they can, draw in to do their projects. And let's face it, if you're going to spend millions of dollars on a production, you want a name to draw people in. So, like for example, Project Hail Mary has Ryan Gosling. Everybody knew who Ryan Gosling is. But if, like, hypothetically, they were like, well, we're going to get this guy Craig Simons to be in it. Everybody be like, who? And they've spent millions of dollars on this. That's probably not going to be a winning combination. It's not necessarily a slam on anybody, but it's like you want those big names. It's a business. You want to draw those people in to go see the movie, to spend their hard earned dollars to go watch this production for 2 or 3 hours. And they want to know it's good. They want to know that they haven't just thrown their money away and their time away. So, man, it is super hard to try to get in. So, man, I'm not so sure if I had to do it all over again that I would necessarily try to pursue rather the Hollywood thing again. I might just do local theater, maybe local productions. And man, if something took off, like if something got and became viral and a career came about that way more organically, then maybe. But that's the part of the acting world that really just kind of made me pause and go, man, is this really something that I want to try to pursue for the rest of my life? Because also when I would get on acting sets, whether it be independent, whether it be student, whether it be that one TV show that I booked that was a Hollywood production, part of me couldn't wait to, it's kind of like you're watching the clock for your shift to end. It was something similar. And I thought to myself, if I want this so bad, why am I sitting here watching the clock? Why aren't I just soaking it in and enjoying the process? To me, it actually seemed like work. And I thought, man, maybe this isn't something I want for myself. So I don't know. I don't know if I'd pursue it again.
It's funny you say that because I mean, when I came to the realization that my wrestling career was over completely, I remember being at my last show and I'm sitting there on commentary and I have my guy next to me and he's like, "Hey everybody, this is Sword Championship Wrestling. It's an exciting night we're gonna have tonight. Podfather, how do you feel about that?" I'm going, "Yeah, I'm all right."
Yeah.
I had no energy for it. I was like, just get this over with so I can go home and give them $50.
Yeah.
And and at that point, I'm like, that's not fair for anyone else who needs my spot. And I've already done what I'm going to do. So I'm hitting my own ceiling. So I'm good. And then I was like, and it's funny because it's like when you leave something on your terms, as you know, when you leave something on your terms, it's so much sweeter than being forced out, because there's a chance I could have been forced out by the promoter. And I don't think he would have done it because he was already on his way out the door as far as life. But I mean, he was sick. He was sick himself. So he was only going to do so much. And then only kid. But like I was doing their YouTube shows. I was doing all their stuff to help promote their stuff. And like you sit there and go, I wasted an entire week and got nothing out of it. And all I got was, yeah, it could have been better. Sorry. So like, if I had the resources, maybe I'd have had more, but didn't have that. But in talking about that though, you a couple of years ago, you decided to make a switch because your police career's come to an end. You're facing retirement with that here pretty soon. You shifted your way towards the Bible. And I think this more or less fits who you are because I've watched your YouTube videos and it's like you're talking about what you truly believe in. There's no acting there, which, to go through the acting class you've gone through, I think really helps you because you can now talk and you have a good voice. I got a shitty voice for what I do. But you got the voice to talk about what your beliefs are and make them work. And I think, as far as you're going into this part, did you ever think of yourself as, wow, one day I'm gonna stand in front of people and talk about the Lord?
Well, yes and no. I mean, being a pastor or something like that is not something even now that I would say is something that I see myself doing. Before I first became a believer in Jesus Christ in November of 1993. So that predates almost everything. Predates even me knowing Misty. That being said, as I was going through getting my bachelor's degree in the 90s, I more or less kind of wanted to be a counselor. And once I became a Christian, I was like, well, I could be a biblical counselor. And I had my heart set on this one particular seminary to go to. And I thought the only way into that seminary is to get to know this one pastor so I can get his recommendation to go to this one seminary because he went there, all this and that. And then when that kind of fell through, I just kind of was like, oh, what am I going to do now? And so obviously the police thing happened, the acting thing happened. But then I was like, you know what? I was still a believer. And for those who who may be believers themselves, that we believe that once you become saved, the Holy Spirit gives you spiritual gifts, basically like supernatural gifts to be able to do things maybe that you wouldn't necessarily normally be able to do otherwise. So for me, everybody always says, you're a really good teacher. you're really good at being able to maybe look at the biblical text, soak it in, and then be able to explain it simply to others. Always my whole Christian life, that's the way it was. And probably once I started getting away from the acting thing, I started realizing, I need to be more faithful with what God has given me in that gift. So I got involved with the ministry called Got Questions. It's gotquestions.org. It's kind of a well-known website with a lot of believers, and you could basically go on there and write any question you want. Obviously, you don't have to be a Christian. You could just have a question about Christianity you want answered. You just go, type in your question. It gets sent to somebody to answer, and I'm one of those people. I'm one of like 200 to 300 volunteers they have. And I was doing that for several years, and I'm like, man, I feel like I need to do more. I feel like I need to do more. I just, not necessarily to, earn my way to God or anything, but just because I wanted to be a little bit more faithful with what God has given me. And so I started a podcast, and you kind of mentioned the videos, and I kind of branched out into making some of those videos because a lot of people may want to watch a video over a podcast. And, you talk about how the whole acting thing may have kind of transitioned over into my production of those. One thing I do know is that if you talk normally on these videos, it comes across very flat, very kind of dry, and very boring. You kind of have to raise your voice up a little bit. And I find myself even doing that now, just not necessarily talking normally, but I'm not acting. But I'm just realizing you need to be a little bit more animated to sound a little bit more normal on the video playback. It's super weird, but I mean, it is a reality.
There's no worse feeling than having to listen to your own voice after you record it and go, God, I sound like that. Really? I've been doing a podcast thing, and I did the podcast thing before when I was just on the run, we just go to iHeartRadio or whatever and just pull me up there. And to hear my own voice, all my stutters and stammerings that I do, and everything else that goes with that, and how I sound like I'm very uneducated in most cases, I'm like, yeah, who wants to listen to that shit? But that's just me, though.
Yeah. I mean, if it's one thing, when we were acting, Misty never liked to see her own work. I mean, she was able to book some stuff, and she never liked to see her own work and whatnot. And I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe there is some sort of narcissism deep down in there somewhere. I didn't mind it as much, and it's not the first time I've heard actors or anybody who sits in front of a camera or an audience who says that they hate to hear themselves, they hate to see themselves. I personally don't mind it, but there are times whenever I'm not doing so hot or not doing so well, or I look back on some podcasts that I've done and kind of talking more like this, and sounds very uninteresting, versus I just bring it up a little bit and, oh, it sounds a little bit better. So yeah, it's like listening to yourself is rough, but at the same time, if you're going to do stuff like this, what we're doing now, or any kind of medium whatsoever, then yeah, trying to engage that audience to where they want to listen to you, because if it doesn't sound interesting to them, they're not going to listen or watch.
Well, yeah, and there's also the idea that look, I've already, like you hear all the actors say, I've already seen what we've done because I was in it. So why should I go back and rewatch it again after they trimmed everything? I'll trimmed all the fat off it. I mean, actors like Gene Hackman, who would, great actor, and he's one of my favorite actors of all time. He would never go back and watch his stuff because he knows what he did. William Shatner, same thing. They talked to him about all the Star Treks that are going on. He's like, man, I never watched them. I've already been a part of that. What do I care? So it's like, I mean, I get that. And so, I knew some wrestlers who would never go back and watch their stuff because they're too busy watching the mistakes they made. They're too busy trying to point out the points that they didn't sell as much, or they botched a spot or whatever else. And they're going, now here it comes, and they want to see that again. I've had that moment too, where I had a match one time where I was a manager, and there was a guy thrown to the corner. I was supposed to take him and hit him in the head, and he was supposed to bounce back, and I was supposed to totally whiff on him, but he's supposed to at least sell it for me. Well, right before I got ready to hit him, he moved, and it pissed me off because I'm in front of all these people who are watching us put on the show. Now they just saw a botch, and I hated that. So when I got him back over towards me again, I reared back and I popped him so hard and hit him right here, really hard. The smack was so loud, the crowd's like going. Oh. I'm like, hey, you gotta do what you gotta do, bro. I'm sorry. I mean, you shouldn't have moved. But going back and watching it again, I'll watch the smack, but I'll never watch the whiff again, because the whiff made me look bad, and I hate that. So, yeah, I totally get what you're saying now. Totally get. So, when you retired now, the pastor thing is still a thing you really want to pursue, right?
Well, like I said, being a pastor or being the pastor is not necessarily something that I'm feeling called to do because, obviously doing something within the church or within service to God, it's like generally is something you want to be called to, not necessarily something like I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's not something. I mean, it is something I want to do. It's something I'm passionate about, but at the same time, you want to be sure that the Lord is who is really the whole motivation for what you're doing. So I hate to say it, but it's like I've been in seminary for 2.5 years, but I'm not 100% sure what I am necessarily called to do. But one thing I can say is where I draw a lot of, I guess you could say, satisfaction and seems to be more of a uh, thing that would probably work out best, at least at this stage, unless God reveals something else, is doing the online ministry that I was doing, the podcasting, the producing videos. I had an idea that I've started, but I haven't really had the time to really see it through 100%. It's a channel on YouTube and X called Shepherd Shield, and it's kind of interweaving my entirety, my faith and what I believe, and telling stories from my days as being a police officer, hence Shepherd's Shield.
Mm-hmm.
So the shield as far as like a police badge, and then the shepherd being Jesus Christ. So I have a little bit on that already. And obviously, as you well know, it's like as soon as you put content out there, it's not like people flock to it. Maybe that happens to some people, but it doesn't happen to most. So it takes a little bit of time to get traction. Even some YouTube channels I really like to watch, they were producing from what they would talk about for like maybe a year, maybe a year and a half before all of a sudden, for whatever reason, one episode just took off. And now they're huge, but it took a while. So I don't know necessarily if the online thing is exactly what I'll end up doing. But for right now, I definitively don't necessarily think that being the pastor of a church is where I'm supposed to go. I'm not 100% on that, but I think maybe an associate pastorship, maybe more of where I'm supposed to go. But realistically, if you're an associate pastor, you're a youth pastor or a worship pastor. And youth, I'm not necessarily feeling called to minister to, young people like, toddlers, young teens and teenagers and stuff like that, high schoolers. I'm not necessarily feeling called to minister to them, more so adults. But realistically, if I'm not the pastor, then I'm not sure what that exactly looks like. A roundabout answer to say I'm not 100% sure, even still.
Sure. Well, the one thing you mentioned earlier, like when you were in acting, how you didn't really, offer any dialogue, you didn't offer any ideas or whatever. Do you think maybe because you fell into that category on the acting part, on the ministry part, you kind of like, well, what more else do I need to do to break myself out, to stand out on my own, so people can either follow me or, or just develop my own shield, as it were, to where people will follow me into whatever I'm talking to, as opposed to just like, being the follower to somebody else's church.
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I will say that I'm not necessarily an idea guy, and it kind of goes back to that whole maybe the creativity aspect isn't necessarily my biggest strong suit. But like I said, I can take basic, uh, I don't know, basic concepts like maybe the book of Romans, and chapter by chapter, I could probably break down exactly what each chapter is talking about. So, as far as that goes, that seems to be where I'm the strongest. But as far as like parlaying, maybe making the correlation between the two, I can't actually come up with a good answer to that, if that makes sense.
You know what we need to do? We need to sit you down. You got a homework assignment for you. You need to watch. You need to watch the movie Night Shift with Michael Keaton.
Oh yeah,
He
yeah,
was
I've
an
watched that
idea.
a lot.
He was an idea man. So yeah,
Even if they were terrible ideas,
don't worry about
he
that.
was an
Don't worry
idea
about
man.
that. He's your foot in the door one way or the other, right? So I mean, look, I mean, I've like I said, I've known you for almost 30 years, sir, and I've I consider you and Miss you're my family in a lot of cases, and you know, I know I hope for nothing but the best for you and whatever happens with your post cop career. Just real quickly, before I let you go, what is one thing my is your family? What is the one thing that you are extremely proud of, and then what is one thing that you wish you could have a redo on?
Oh wow, that is a really overarching question.
I'm here for the
The
big
one thing
question.
that definite do what?
I'm here for the big question, sir.
Here are the big questions. Yes. Uh, man, the one thing that really just I don't necessarily know if it's something I'm necessarily proud of, but probably the biggest thing that I could say right now is um, just how I came to know Jesus Christ is probably the biggest thing that I would point to. Is I was a guy who wasn't raised in the church whatsoever, and I was just like just average normal teenager at that time, and I didn't really have any thoughts here or there. I really loved heavy metal and stuff like that. Went off to
I missed the hair, bro.
university.
I missed the hair pictures.
Yeah, I know. Had hair down to here.
Right.
Really long. Not anymore though. Yeah. Um, so anyway, I made a friend with a guy named Kevin who, we were kind of like-minded in that respect, but he identified as a warlock. And so he's a guy basically who practiced witchcraft, which I was kind of fascinated in, but it also kind of scared me to death. Same time, the idea of the occult, demons, and all that sorts of wild stuff. But we were having a conversation one night, and he was telling me about his witchcraft stuff, and I'm like, "Hey, man, do you ever, cast spells on women to make them want to do things with you?" And he's like, "Yeah, all the time." And I'm like, "Man, I want to learn how to do that." And he paused for a second, and he said, "No, you don't." And I said, "Well, yeah, I do. Of course I do. And you can't say something like that without explaining yourself. So what do you mean by that?" And he said, "Well, I was raised in the church." And I was like, "Okay, what does that have to do with anything?" And he goes, "Well, I was raised to believe that Jesus died for my sins, rose from the dead, and by believing that, I can have eternal life." And I was like, "Wait, what?" That just hit me like a ton of bricks. And long story short, about 2 or 3 weeks later, I believed upon the Lord Jesus Christ, and I believe, according to the scriptures, received eternal life, and that forever changed my trajectory on life, changed me as a person, and pretty much has led me to where I am today. That is probably the biggest thing that I could point to of any things that happened in my life that I could say necessarily that I'm proud of, even though it sounds weird. I would not change anything about that. That is probably the one point in life that I could point to that I am the most proud of, as weird as that may sound to some people. But to me, Jesus is everything. He is my all. He is just the wonder of my life. And to answer the second part of your question, you said something about what is a thing that I could do over if I had to do it over again. Is that
Yeah.
right?
What's your biggest regret that if you can go back and do it all over again, you do it again?
Man, I tell you what, it's kind of a tie of two things. Number one is just how I've handled money over my life. Uh, my parents, I would always say, Craig, you got that money. It's just burning a hole in your pocket. I just couldn't wait to spend it on whatever. And as I've gotten older, I realized just how scarce a resource money can be, and that I wished I'd done a better job in stewarding it. I think over the last 10 years or so, I've gotten a lot better about it, but it's almost like I'm catching up at this point. I'd wished that what we started 10 years ago, I'd started 20 years before that. Um, but man, I tell you what, I'm probably saying that from the point of view of um, those lessons I learned. Without the bad things that I didn't necessarily, or not bad necessarily, but not the most wise things that I did with money, and then going, well, heck, how am I going to do this and this and this now, has led me to the place where I am now, to where in the last 10 years, I know how important it is to save more than it is to spend. If that all that makes sense.
It does.
As far as the second thing that's kind of tied with it, believe it or not, I don't think if I had to do it over again, I don't think I would go into law enforcement. As weird as that sounds, because the reason why I say that is just because I knew that that's something that Misty didn't necessarily want to have to be married to, because it's not just like, oh, I want to go do this thing. Because when you do this job, it involves the entire family.
Mhm.
Believe it or not, they're not doing it, but they're having to, I don't want to say suffer the effects, but they will feel the effects of it, because this job just grinds on you. And there's a reason why there's a whole, especially here in Texas, most of the officers are 20 and out because of how much this job can actually grind on you. I mean, just the sleep deprivation, uh, the amount of stress that it can cause. And we're not just talking about the calls that you go through. We're talking about maybe some of the internal dealings you have to deal with. Maybe you don't get along with your boss. Maybe you don't get along with the administration. Maybe there's a case that goes before the DA, and now you've got to be on that stand and you've got to testify, and you're going to get grilled by a defense attorney for 6 hours. I've been there. It's not fun. This job comes with so much stress, and I know a lot of jobs do, but I would say that the stressors of being a police officer is very unique. Or if I had to do it over again, if I was going to be in any kind of public safety job, I'd be a firefighter.
There we
Everybody
go.
loves a firefighter,
Sure.
but I didn't necessarily want to do it, because a fire is, when you've got a massive fire and you're running into that building to put it out, that whole thing can consume you. Duh, right?
Mhm.
But if you're a police officer going to a person with a gun call or whatever, maybe they're not a great shot. And so if they start shooting at you, there's a good chance they might miss you. Versus a fire may well engulf you and burn you, either scarring you for life or kill you. And
Mhm.
being burned to death is probably one of the lower things that, if I had to choose the way I died, I'd probably not choose that. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, no,
Um,
no, let's compare the two now. Being engulfed in flames or drowning. Which one would you rather have?
oh goodness, man. Neither. um, oh wow. Probably drowning. Yeah,
I don't
being
know.
burned to death.
I don't know if I want to be
Ugh.
fish food.
Well,
I've already told myself when I'm dead, I want to be cremated. So being caught up in the fire is already halfway there. So I'm already good there.
uh, about dying in your sleep is about the only good way I can think of
That's
to
the only
go.
way. You're right.
But yeah, man. But yeah, just I
We
don't
took
know.
a dark
Being a
turn.
police officer,
Took a little
yeah,
quick dark
hard
turn there.
turn. Yeah, just being an officer, it's like the stressors that I know that is put on my entire family is just, if I had to do it over again, I'd probably spare them of that.
All right. I get that. I 100% get that because I've had many conversations with Misty, and she'd always say how much she didn't like you being a police officer, but she also knew that this is what you had to do to pay the bills. This is what you had to do because you're already invested that much into it. Real quick before I let you go, because gun safety is a big issue, right, for a lot of people. And we see kids with guns in schools and everything else. And they even one kid a couple of years ago hit up me and Missy's old school in Newman Smith, not too long ago. But I'm an advocate of idiots shouldn't have guns. That's why I don't have a gun. But where do you fall on the idea of gun safety with parents who have kids who, have guns? Well, what's your thoughts about that?
So specifically, like if they have kids and they decide to have guns in the house, that's what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, definitively, you need to have a gun safe, and whenever that weapon is not being manipulated by you, in terms of like if you're going to the range or if you're cleaning it or what else, going hunting or whatever it is you're doing with it, it needs to be locked up. And whether or not that you decide that you're going to have the weapon loaded or anything like that, man, I would just leave that to the individual owner. But that weapon needs to not be where the kids could get to it. Likewise, I think if you decide to have guns in the house, once they get to a certain age where starting to teach them gun safety and about that gun, because realistically, a gun is a neutral object, meaning, like, for example, these are just glasses, right? They help me read.
Right.
They can do nothing on their own, right? If I drop it, then they fall. They just sit there. They just do nothing until I do something with it, right?
Right.
Likewise, a gun is a neutral object until somebody decides to do something with it. And a gun is something that has a purpose, right? It's meant to kill and destroy. It really is. Whether it be that you're hunting and you're hunting animals, or whether it be you're defending yourself against someone or something or whatever. Until you start doing something with that neutral object, it can do nothing to harm you. So teaching the kids when it's appropriate to do so, how to safely handle said gun, I think is a responsible thing to do. Now, obviously, that's up to each parent to decide if they're going to do that with their children. But the bare minimum is that that weapon needs to be secured in a fashion where the kids can't get to it. And I understand it's like there have been cases where it's like, was it Broward County, Florida? I think he used his parents' guns.
Broward County, Florida. So probably.
So I think that was an instance where he got his parents' guns and used it. It may have been somewhere else. I may be kind of mixing them up. And I understand that, the gun debate is a hotly contested
Well,
thing.
I mean, it's hotly contested, but here's the thing, though. It's also about mental illness too in some cases, like because social media is become nothing more than a big toxic wasteland for people to sit there and bitch and moan and complain, right? So so when you get on when you're a young kid and you're getting bullied or whatever the deal is on social media, so the whole world can see that you're just going to take it, and then all of a sudden, hey, my dad's got a gun, I'm going to go blow up, I'm going to go shoot up the school because I'm upset with all this. That's a bigger issue, I think, than just gun control. So, again, this is where I go in the idea that idiots shouldn't have guns because, it doesn't take much for someone to become an idiot. It just all takes is one thing to trigger them, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm taking out 7 people because my feelings are hurt. So, to me, that's a bigger issue. And again, I'm not against people having guns. I'm all for the Second Amendment. I have no problem at all. I have a problem with me having one because I have a son with autism. I have an emotional, had a very emotional daughter who probably didn't feel like her words were being said, or being heard in the house enough, So I have reasons enough not to carry a weapon, and even at my job, I don't. I can only carry a taser. Whereas, when I know you carry a gun because you have to because you're a police officer. So, but in order to speak upon mental health, it doesn't have to be a bigger issue that our Congress should be looking at now, as opposed to not just the gun issue, but let's worry about mental health issues once we tackle that, then we worry about the gun issue as well. Or is it one big thing as well? Because again, you fix one thing to fix the other, but at the same time, they're all kind of colluding together. So, I mean, how do we attack that? Especially when you have a group like the NRA who sits there and goes, "Well, guns don't kill people." Well, fair, people do that, but they're using your gun to do it. So, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah, I think, obviously with it being a constitutional right here in the United States, it complicates the issue infinitely. You have other countries where, they just ban the guns outright, or they can actually say, under certain conditions, you can never have a gun. Here in the United States, it's complicated by that Second Amendment. So, if it's one thing that I've kind of taken a position on with these kinds of topics, is as someone who's more interested in being a spiritual leader over anything else, I would say that I don't have strong feelings either way. I do think, though, that within the United States, we have probably, of the human governments that have existed, is probably one of the best ones. Just because we have the right to freedom, we have the right to say whatever we want, we have the right to publicly assemble, we do have the right to bear arms. So theoretically, something like the whole thing 250 years ago can't happen again, kind of thing. We can't have a group come in and just take over because they want to. Times were a lot different back then, but still, we have those constitutional amendments. We have the right against unreasonable searches and seizures. There was something that Misty and I were watching. It's a show called Ponies, and I think it's on Peacock, that streaming service Peacock, NBC. And Ponies is kind of like an acronym: person of no interest. And it's basically set in the 1980s in Russia during the Cold War. And the ponies, or the persons of no interest, were the wives of these other two guys that got killed by the Soviets. If people don't know, obviously, Soviets were before the United Socialist Soviets, or the USSR, fell.
For those who are watching, just go watch Rocky IV. You'll get this.
And the reason why I bring this up is because I was, as we're sitting there watching this and they're having this scene in this particular apartment, I was like having the thought that, the KGB, which is the Soviet secret police, could just come in at any time and just do whatever to them, and there would be no recourse. That would be the government's right to do so. Versus here in the US, man, we actually can tell the police at our door, you can't come in and save, any kind of exigent or emergency circumstances, or a search warrant issued by a judge. They can't come in. And I'm like, man, that's incredible freedom that we have here. So to circle back to what you were asking, man, it's a complicated issue. I'm not going to pretend that I know the answer or that I have a great answer for it. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think mental illness probably does play a lot into a lot of the gun problems that we're seeing in our country. But what do we do about it without being omniscient ourselves? Obviously, we don't know what's going on with each individual person. And quite often you hear that with some of these active shooters that have come up. It's like he had no red flags. And then all of a sudden he goes and shoots up the school. So it's like, man, I honestly don't know what the solution is, apart from, I don't necessarily think with the freedoms that we have that taking all the guns is necessarily a solution, but I can't pretend to know that there is a particular solution to be had, just simply because it's a constitutional right. And to infringe on that, man, I don't know. I don't have great answers. And I think that's probably why it is continuing to be a problem, because realistically, it's a hard problem to try to address.
I think it's hard to find the answer to a problem when the other side is always going to sit there and throw out red flags why it shouldn't be a problem, or or why we always have two tunes of the conversation, right? And neither one are going to agree on everything, because they're only hearing one part of that, and the other part's going to hear the other part of that, and they're not going to hear all of it, So until we actually come to a point to where we can sit down and actually say, I think Rob Williams, I think he had a joke about about back in the 80s, tell you how long ago this was. He says, you take Ronald Reagan, you take Mikhail Gorbachev, you sit them down, you have an Italian guy like Vinny, say, sit down. We're going to talk this shit out, okay? This is what we're going to do. You're going to have that. You're going to have that. You're going to make this all good work for everybody, all right? Until we have something like that, I think, we're kind of in that kind of situation to where, this country is going to just sit there. And, I mean, you being in law enforcement and you see stuff left and right. I see it in my neck of the woods, with me being in Oklahoma and marijuana is illegal here, medically at least. So, and gives everybody a reason to
it's
go out
recreationally too.
Not yet.
In Oklahoma? Yeah.
No, it's only municipal right now.
Mm.
You gotta get a prescription to get it. So
No,
now they got
but
weed
anyway.
shops everywhere. Don't get me wrong. They got them all over the place here because those make money. I mean, thus watch the TV show Tulsa King. I mean, that's kind of an idea of where the Oklahoma weed market is right there. So, But man, I really enjoy having you on the show, man. I mean, you and I, like I said, we've been doing this for a long time, and anytime I get a chance to sit down and talk talk anything with you, because we don't really talk very often. But it's cool to have you on, and hope to get you back on here again, bro.
Yeah. This is fun. I enjoyed it.
Cool. We'll see you then. See you, everybody.
Oh,